This meeting is convened by Internationalism from Below and the Tempest Collective, and co-sponsored by Spring Magazine, the Review of African Political Economy, DSA Afro-Socialists and Socialists of Color Caucus, the online magazine Africa is a Country, New Politics Magazine, and Dissenters. Thanks to everyone for being here today on Halloween, for understanding the importance and gravity of the situation in Sudan right now and the need to build solidarity with the Sudanese struggle. What we are seeing now may be considered a second wave of the Sudanese revolution that began in December 2018 and overthrew Omar al-Bashir's 30-year rule, then quickly also overthrew the next military installed Ibn Auf and demanded a civilian government. The Sudanese revolution was connected to the uprisings, was and is connected to the uprisings across the Middle East and North Africa that began in 2011. And Sudan's was one of the strongest due to the leadership and centralization under the Sudanese Professionals Association and its strong unions that managed to shut down the economy time after time. But after a massacre by the military in June 2019, and intense pressure by counter-revolutionary states, as well as some contradictions on the ground, the Forces for Freedom and Change made an agreement with the military in the summer of 2019 that brought about a dangerous impasse to the struggle. This past Monday, the military staged a coup to attempt to retake complete power. And since then, millions of Sudanese have come out in protest, barricaded the streets, and returned to general strike. Yesterday, October 30th, was a millions march with mass protests in cities all across Sudan, as well as solidarity protests globally. So this meeting today is to discuss how we as leftists and union organizers specifically can continue to build solidarity with the Sudanese uprising and working classes, to push back against this counter-revolution and support the struggle for freedom, democracy, and social justice. Our speakers today are Muzan and Alneel. She's calling in from Khartoum. She's written and spoken extensively about the Sudanese revolution and is co-founder of the Innovation, Science, and Technology think tank for people-centered development in Sudan. We're very lucky to have Muzan calling in because the internet was shut down for a couple hours today in Sudan, and we didn't think we would have her, but it just got restored. So, and we also have Rabab and Elnaiem, who is a member of the Sudanese Workers Alliance for the Restoration of the Trade Unions, and she will be our second speaker. So each will speak for about 15 minutes, then we'll have questions from the audience, and finally discussion. And we'll be recording the two presentations, but then we will not be recording the Q&A and the sections afterwards. So without further ado, Muzan, welcome.
Thank you very much, Shireen. Thank you very much, and thank you for the introduction, which summed a lot of the details of what happened over the past 2 years. What I will try to do over the few coming minutes is to share some observations from the ground that I think are useful to understanding the full situation. As Shireen mentioned, on October 25th, we woke up to a coup, actually as early as 4 a.m. News started circulating about the detention of the civilian ministers. And it was about 5 a.m. when we lost all internet connection. And the national television was showing music. And we've been through enough coups to know what happened. By around 6 a.m., when we were out in the streets, we were not alone. Actually, you could see thousands of people already in the streets, building barricades and burning tires, which is, the traditional expected actions in case of a coup in Sudan, and what people have been already saying that they will do in case of a coup. Actually, the earliest strike that was announced was the bankers' strike at around 7 a.m. And the reason that they were this early to announce their strike is that they've already pre-announced it weeks ago, expecting a strike. the bankers have already put out a statement that in case of expecting a coup, in case of a coup, they will be in a strike, and they managed to actually put that in action as they heard the military marches and the military music on television. People were out in the streets, and I think one of the things that are missed and not it's not really possible to convey it just by news is how people felt and what is the vibe. How was it like? How was the vibe in the street? And what I saw on the first day, on that day, we just knew it's a coup. It was still a few hours before the first killings started by the military. And what we saw in the street is that people were happy. It felt like people have been holding their breaths for way too long, and that they were happy that it's time that we're gonna go into this fight. And it's what we usually call a delayed battle. That this was a delayed battle that was held for too long. People were ready with their chance, and the chance were, they were celebrating the fact that we are here finally. This was the feeling in the streets at that time. Barricades were being built. People were crossing the bridges from one side of Khartoum to the other to come, all of them, to the center of Khartoum or downtown Khartoum. And many of them actually went to the area of the previous sit-in, which took place in 2019, which is the area around the military headquarters. And that's where the killing started. And we saw the first killings and the first injuries coming from there. It's different this time also from the observations of the people who were there, that no one force, and this is a country of militias. We need to keep that in mind. This is a country with a lot of militias, including the army is one of them. Most of them are now state militias. After the Juba peace agreement, they're all supposed to be officially part of the state militias. And it was this time we didn't see any forces hold back. The military did not take its usual, noble stance of being, we're the military, we do not murder people, but we just stand by as they are murdered, which is the normal stance of the military in the country. Going back to why people expected this coup is coming. It's very frustrating that whenever I watch media this time, all the anchors are talking about this expected coup, while 2 weeks ago none of them wanted to expect it or predict it or talk about it. But yeah, first of all, since 2 years ago, it was always predicted, given the fact that the partnership and the setup of the partnership between the civilian and military could not hold, and that is something we knew. But also there were rising tensions between the military and the civilian arms during the past 6 weeks or so. And on the surface, there were supposed to be tensions around the date of handing over the head of the state from the military side to the civilian side. And honestly, the civilian side pulled out a lot of technicalities to move the data around and start what seemed to be a fight with the military. And on the other side, this whole thing about being at the top of the state is not something that in reality was utilized or can be utilized by the civilian side. They had the majority in the Sovereign Council all the time. They never utilized it. They never pushed any decision through the Sovereign Council that is against the military or was rejected by the military. So I find it somewhat difficult to believe that this is the actual reason. And I do think that at a certain moment, we need to understand what started the unrest and the tension between the two sides, but it's not something it's not honestly the priority right now, but maybe we'll find out that maybe if we spend more time understanding that, we can have an easier battle or a better outcome out of this. As mentioned in the introduction, people took into the streets, barricades were built, strikes took place. The country was in situation of total civil disobedience. This was managed in lack of communication. This was managed basically by the resistance committees, the neighborhood resistance committees, and it still is. The neighborhood resistance committees has issued First, they put out the call for a millions march on the 30th of October, which was yesterday. And prior to that, on the 29th, they've put out their demands, why they're marching against the military. They put out a list of 7 demands that I would actually like to read to you. So the 7 demands that were put out by the resistance committees was the overthrow of the military coup and hand over full power to civilians. Hand over all members of the military council to urgent and immediate trials on charges of instituting a military coup. 3, no dialogue or negotiation with any of the members of the military council and members of the security committee, and reject any interference by international access. 4, dissolve armed militias and reconfigure a national armed forces within a specified period and in accordance with the national doctrine aimed at protecting the country's borders and the people's rights to freedom, peace, and justice. 5, remove all armed and civic forces from the political process once and for all by criminalizing the practice of politics by the military. 6, forming all the structures of the transitional authority within a specified period under the supervision of the relevant professional and academic bodies. And 7, complete independence and sovereignty of the Sudanese state with regard to all economic, political, and security decisions. Those demands were first issued by one of the committees in one neighborhood. Khartoum is a tripartite city, so it was one neighborhood within one part of the tripartite city, and within hours it was adopted by Omdurman, which is the part where the one neighborhood is, and by the midnight before the 30th of October it was adopted by the 3 parts of the capital, and it was put out as not as demands but as goals of the revolutionary movement by the resistance committees in the capital. This part is not mentioned in the media. In reality, up until now, all the media that I get access to, although limited, but yeah, the main channels and the mainstream ones, they're mentioning that people are out against the decisions of the military, although it's very clear that those demands go further, and they are also related to issues that the resistance committees went into struggles with the partnership government throughout the past months. Some of them, basically, the point regarded the independence and sovereignty of the Sudanese state regarding decisions. It's a long battle between the resistance committees and the government regarding the interference of international organizations, of international monetary organizations as well, in putting the policy of the country. So it's very clear that those demands go beyond the immediate problem, and that is one of the, you know, it can be a good definition of a revolution, you know, going beyond those immediate problems towards roots of the issue. This is not mentioned. Actually, the existence of resistance committees is something that you can easily miss watching the mainstream media, although they are the ones putting out the calls for the millions march. They are the ones putting out the tracks and the plans and putting out the demands. And those demands were actually read out loud among the crowds during the millions march. And it was it's a video that is out there in social media, but yeah, mainstream media decides to just ignore it again and again.
Muzan, you're at 10 minutes. You just have 5 minutes left.
Sure. Thank you very much. The other point I want to go to is what was happening before the millions march, and it kind of, you know, got stronger and louder afterwards, which are the efforts of mediations that we are seeing coming from UNITAMS and the representatives of the UN General Secretary in Sudan, and that we're also seeing coming from some ambassadors, the British ambassador who put out a video calling for dialogue, and those were called out by the public and by the resistance committee very strongly. And this is a big step, honestly, from where we were 2 years ago, where even the resistance committees at that time, although they were young and just building their their building even their language and building their stances and so on. At that time, to stand against the international community was not something to expect. And even the calls for civil disobedience and the calls for full civilian government, those were things we are only seeing in the in the radical pockets of the revolution, and they're becoming more mainstream now after people saw the failure of what happened, of the compromise. What I think is our biggest challenge right now is those mediation efforts, some of them coming from international and from national actors. And I would say that our strongest weapon is to directly call them out and criminalize them. That includes us and our allies internationally, that it should be called what it is. Those are counter-revolutionary efforts to force a compromise on the Sudanese people that the people are clearly out on the streets rejecting. We are seeing international diplomats, including the representative of the General Secretary, tweeting about this again and again, his efforts of mediation, not mentioning the fact that we are in internet shutdown. Like, what the connection I have right now is exceptional. That's not the case. The country does not have internet connection right now, and they are not mentioning this. They managed to never mention the 12 people who were killed since the coup by the state. By the state's weapons, basically. And what I will ask you guys, just call them out. Like, call them out for being what they are, for being counter-revolutionary racists. And those are the most polite words I can share with you right now. But yeah, that's all from my side. Thank you very much.
Thank you so much. Rabab, do you want to go ahead?
Sure, yes. I want to start first by acknowledging glory to the martyrs of Sudan, and long live the struggle of the people of Sudan. I'm very, very, very excited, very happy to hear the voice of Muzan. And not just because of she's Muzan, to hear the voice of someone from home right now. On behalf of the Sudanese Worker Alliance for Restoration of Trade Unions, I thank you all for your solidarity. And I'm excited to build camaraderie and to exchange and build lessons that will help advance the struggle of the working class. Like Muzan mentioned before, there is literally no coup without local and regional and international support. But we should not just stop at acknowledging that support. We should track the financial interest, economic interest behind that support. And there is many in Sudan. One example we can mention is the international conflict on the Red Sea and the race to build military bases in the Red Sea. With that, we would see that a couple of days before the coup, Hemeti and Burhan met as American envoy for Horn of Africa, and they came out with like this statement trying to protect whatever is called democratic transformation. And I think this is the key word that we need to think of, and that we all need to like stop and think, what do we mean by democratic transformation, and how we can achieve that, and who's trying to protect it from who. Because this is literally, although what's happening right now in Sudan is very scary, although we are in a disbelief, but like Muzan mentioned, we're also kind of relieved because this was bound to happen. We were actually looking forward, in a sense, to that in a deeper level, because it effectively takes us back to April 2019. It takes us back to the lead of the streets, but hopefully takes us back with lessons we've learned, with new allies and with new tools to resist what happened, and with mistakes that we've learned, and we're definitely not planning to redo those same mistakes. So like I said, and like Muzan mentioned earlier, there was no escaping this coup, because to begin with, the coup was happening since 2019. This is how I see it. We have been in a coup since April 2019. And that coup, when happened, not Ibn Auf, the one after Ibn Auf, Burhan, it was under this banner of stopping the bloodshed. And the way I see it is this keyword of democratic transformation, the way I define it from my class stand is different from the way elites in Sudan define it. Literally in April 2019, the revolutionary were on the street, but elites will look at them and not see democracy. And will look at closed doors and whatever economical interest behind that and be like, no, this is democracy, that is not democracy. So if we wanna protect whatever democratic transformation and whatever civilian government, we should start thinking, what do we mean by that? And this is what is exciting about this second wave of the revolution. And this mentality of looking at the revolutionary, looking at the people of Sudan on the street and disclaiming their democratic process, taking away their voice and giving them to someone else, to some sort of a negotiator in the middle or some sort of like money interest. This is not, it's within the formation of the way we understand politics. It goes back deep to how we define politics and how we define political activism. For example, if we go back and just try to very quickly critique the FFC, Forces for Freedom and Change, or even the Sudanese Professional Association, we see, regardless of their intention, we don't care really about like what goes in your heart. We care about your action and how they affect the livelihood of other people. We've seen that over and over again, they keep missing the chance to actually build from below and to actually give meaning to their institution, give meaning to this terminology of democracy, and they still end up within like lowering the bar of the people. And this, and although consistently, I would say that the general, like the ordinary revolutionary on the street is gaining knowledge, learning lessons. If we go back to April 6th, going all back to what happened to April 11 and how Ibn Auf did not even stand a chance, and how even within the setting, how the chanting was advancing. We've seen chanting advancing, we've seen the movement advance to the point of the strike or the civil disobedience in May 28, May 29, 2019, and all the way up to earlier in 2021, when we've seen on the street slogans against neoliberals, against new colonial forces in Sudan. And even yesterday in Sudan, we've seen slogans in Sudan calling out international and regional actors. So within the growing of the street, like Muzan earlier said, resistance committee are literally growing, finding their footing, finding this idea of democracy and how they're going to practice it on a daily basis and how they're going to claim power and rebuild the state for the people according to their understanding and practice of democracy. So like I said, this idea of this new liberal vision of democracy, simplifying and reducing democracy to an election, to a negotiation, to some sort of an elite class that can decide the fate of the entire population of Sudan and literally the entire region, because it definitely affects the entire region. This seeped into, like Burhan did already put a decision to dissolution trade unions and professional association. And this was not the first time we've been through this. This actually happened, I just need to check the date. This happened on April 28th, right? And although it happened on April 28th, the Syrian and the revolutionary momentum in Sudan picked up and we were able to collect signature and start general assembly. Then again, Burhan backed down and in May 22nd, maybe lifted the ban on trade unions. And this was all a step to cut off the way for the general civilian disobedience in May 28, May 29. But unfortunately, Burhan was not the only actor that trying to limit the forces of that civilian disobedience. Even within the SPA, even within the most left of the Sudanese politics, they want this to happen, but they're not really sure, because at the core of the political process, it's like they just don't see it. Like they see people and they don't see democracy. Like they see democracy defined in a different way, and this is what we need to focus on. So I'm very excited for the fact that these 2 years, maybe we have learned one lesson. Right now, different type of union or like worker organization range from a full-blown union with its entire executive office elected to steering committee that unfortunately was assigned by the state through what's known as the empowerment removal / dismantle committee. They kind of stop or like put unions on hold through the state by a political decision, and then they appoint steering committee. But some workers, some fields, for example, electricity workers in the capital Khartoum, they actually refused the empowerment removal committee. And they have worked with the preliminary steering committee that was elected, and they're building from below. Teachers of University of Khartoum, professors of University of Khartoum were able to actually fully elect their union, and oil workers for state oil companies were also able to elect a preliminary steering committee. And all of these people came out with a statement in different ways, in different capacities, effectively saying that they reject this decision. And they say that they acknowledge and they know the power of the working class, and they know that they have the power to stop the economy. They have the power to literally put the state in their hand. And they understand that Burhan have done this twice before, and they understand that their legitimacy and their power does not come from a political decision. It comes from the power of the General Assembly. And if the last 2 years, on the union side, on the worker movement side, just gave us this big lesson, then in itself, that is very exciting. So I very much like to make the comparison, or like to think of resistance committee from one side and union or worker organization that are speaking from one side, just because the base of the organization itself is on common interest. And this is important and key, because you don't replace the people with the main interest with some elite or some international actor saying that I have your best interest at hand, I know what to do, and this is how you should do it. The same way we see that actors from within Sudan, the same actor that was part of engineering the agreement, or like the partnership between the military and the civilian side, they're coming back again, like Muzan mentioned earlier. So the key—
Rabab, you're at 10 minutes.
Okay. So the way we can counterfact this process is to go back to defining what do we mean by democratic transformation? How can we think of that, and how can we not repeat the same mistake of allowing others to replace us? It's actually an insult. And I'm very happy. I'm grateful for Muzan for mentioning that media does not speak of resistance committee. They speak of the protest, they speak of the movement on the street, without speaking about the people who actually generated this movement. And this was not the case with PSA, right? It was not the case of Sudanese Professional Association, because Sudanese Professional Association had the same disease that FFC had. I think I would stop here, and I would like give more time to Muzan if she had more to answer, and to people. I'm very excited for the idea of building camaraderie and like exchanging and learning lessons. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Muzan and Rabab. That was incredibly helpful. It's really inspiring, especially hearing about the lessons. And I'm thinking like the lessons learned from the struggle in Egypt, you know, not to allow the military to take over, and more lessons being learned for the next wave. So it's very hopeful.